Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some of y'all and peace out to the rest of you. You know who it is. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I wish that I had better news, but I do my best. Lily Paris put up that post and we all saw it. On those of you that looked on my Facebook page and those of you that looked on my community tab. And I want to give a shout out to Selecta J for getting me hip to it. For those that didn't see it, Lily Paris is probably in Trinidad and Tobago. And she, on her own profile pictures, is a red woman, i.e. a light-skinned woman, taking a usual booty shot picture for Facebook. And she said she doesn't mess with red men anymore, meaning light-skinned men anymore, because we want to act like our JJs are better than hers. And then she put in hashtag boov Mitch, and I'm using the spoonerism to not curse, but her hashtag had the B word in it. It wasn't just a preference, it was an emasculation, the usual. And that was why in the YouTube community tab post I put up Black America's gift to the Anglophone Caribbean, or the Anglophone West, one of the two. Now, mind you, she's illiterate, not punctuating, not capitalizing. She's a ditzy broad, I can tell, like many are. But she gets away with that. However, the message that she sent was the healthy self-love, self-respect, and self-esteem that a man should have if he wants to be with anybody, because we women don't like insecure men. Insecure men is not the same thing if you're a red man and you come with these traits. If you're a red guy and you come with these traits, you're just conceited and stuck up, and you think you're better and you want to compete with us, and you're really the woman in the relationship. People keep on coming with this prison cell block notion of us being women. Of course, I'm sick and tired of this mess when I see it. And let me explain this. It could be a joke. Maybe. If it is a joke, it is as important to put a disclaimer in there so that we'll know it's a joke as it would be if somebody, her shade, was taking a shot at darker skinned women or darker skinned men. Either way. If it's important to put a disclaimer in one, it's important to put the disclaimer in the other. I understand jokes, I can take them and I can give them back. But we got to separate what's jokes from what's real if that's what we're going to do. And I don't see black folks agreeing anywhere that we're going to be careful to do that. See, there are two challenges that black folks don't take on. We got the crate challenge, we got the bucket challenge. We've done all these challenges. The two challenges we've not taken back are the solidarity challenge and the complement each other challenge. We don't have those. We do not validate each other socially in general. Right now, though, there is some measure of social validation you can get from being the stereotypically negative sister, the stereotypical strong black woman. So long as you're melanated enough and you're big enough and you're not too attractive. And you can get some measure of validation, victim validation. And there will be times you will be victims and there will be times you will not, but you can still get the victim validation, deserved and undeserved. You can get that, and that's all black folks can get. Unfortunately, that's led to a type of psychosis that we've seen. A notion that light-skinned privilege is uncontested. Does it exist? I assume it does. But this notion that it exists uncontested is foolishness. The black community does not let anybody get privilege and then just enjoy their privilege. So if you're light skinned and you're growing up in the black community, there'll be a few cases and a few times when some color struck elders will give you some privilege or preferential treatment a few times, but you will far more often hear about how somebody went easier on you because of your shade than you will experience it. And you will catch crap for the perception of the ease you received. Far more often than you will receive any such ease. Consequently, as I've said, the few little bits and trinkets of so-called light-skinned privilege are far outweighed by the fact that black folks in general don't do the solidarity challenge and don't do the compliment each other challenge. Fact is, those two never even existed by name. I mean, they're there in real life, but they've just never existed by that name. No one's ever called them that before. I'm the first one to say that. So therefore, I realize that a lot of LS and mixed people think that they've been benefiting from this privilege. I realize many of them think they have been because it's not that life's easy for them. It's just they assume that it's far rougher than it actually is for someone with a higher melanin count, when in fact neither of you had it easy. But each one of you has been trained to overestimate something about the other one's experience. You've been trained to overestimate the difficulty they face. They've been trained to overestimate the ease you get. And so we get to bickering, and the real enemy gets to laugh all the way to the bank. In any case, I wanted to say something about what this lady said, Lily Paris. What she did was she hyper-scrutinized the LSM man. Now, maybe the threshold in Trinidad and Tobago was just being light-skinned by itself. I know that in some parts of the U.S., there's one threshold, and in another part, it's another threshold. Where I came up, you could be light-skinned, but you better have 4C hair, some kind of muscle, be known to have gotten into a few fights. Had to. I know that. Also, where I grew up, things are different for different age groups. Some guys that are about 4 years older than I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about because they never faced it, because their age group didn't go through that. You could go a little bit further inland in the southeast, but you have to go into areas where there's hardly any exposure to Western, or they're just really behind the times. You know, where they still driving around in them 1980s Camaros. Them areas. Well, that's what it takes. I could go into those areas and I could have a slightly different experience, but then again, ain't no privilege, because again, whatever privilege is perceived is going to be very well offset by the punishment and the penalties that have to come from that. That's all there is. There is nothing else. Going to the Midwest, a little bit different. West Coast, a bit different. I understand that the threshold does change, but the pattern still tends to be the same. And what she did was she hyper-scrutinized the men that were beyond the threshold for her region. The threshold for low melanin and racial ambiguity. Because understand this, gentlemen, especially you LSM men listening, you're not going to get a pass. You could be considered vain, and your healthy self-respect and self-esteem becomes a feminine vanity when she's there. That's how she sees it. Now you're vain and you're effeminate. That's how she views you. She sees you like that. You're vain and you're effeminate because you have a healthy self-respect. But understand, if you had any humility, she would see that as low self-esteem. And now you're just a punk and you're insecure. It doesn't matter. It's not just that she has a preference, which is fine. It is the hyper-scrutiny that is bothersome. And trust you me, you've been through this as an adult far more than any woman of any shade has been through the same thing as an adult. Now, as a kid and in the teens, they probably went through it too. Everybody catches it then. But as an adult, it doesn't stop for you, gentlemen. And in all honesty, if you're abundantly melanated, you still have to deal with other things because they have biases based on things like ear size, let alone heighten anything else. But I did want to explain something to you gentlemen, and even to LSM women that don't mean us any harm. First off, to you LSM gentlemen, listen. This type of thing, if you've been exposed to it repeatedly, it is going to bother you, and it is not your fault that you might feel a sense of trauma or bother about it. You do have to live healthy and remain well adjusted. You can't just go off. But what I will say is that there are times when you start to wonder about what you're about to be blamed for next that you did not actually do. That's a normal outcome of this, I think. See, to give an example, the door to where I live can be latched from the inside and not be open from the outside. So you can lock someone out who has a key as long as you're inside. Sometimes my wife leaves while I'm away from the house. She may go to the corner store, or she may go and give something to the neighbors or take something from the neighbors, things like that. She'll come in and she'll latch the inside, and I'll walk in and it's latched and I can't open it. Now, she's forgetful. She doesn't mean any harm. I'm not very nice when she does that, but she really doesn't mean any harm. That's an honest human error. If she were American, the very third time she did something like that, I would have right off the bat said, this is it. She doesn't want me. She locked me out. I'll call her to come unlock it. I'll get my stuff in and I'll leave. Now, that's because that's what I learned from American women. I didn't learn it from dark-skinned American women. I didn't learn it from light-skinned American women. I learned it from decent-looking, let alone attractive American women. That's what I learned. Hyper-scrutiny. Everything you do is subject to a whole lot of analysis. And since black folks don't compliment and validate each other, and we don't practice giving each other the benefit of any doubt, really, therefore, a lot of negative assumptions are placed upon you, and it's now the burden of proof is on you to prove them wrong. And so then, you're gone. God forbid you respect her space and respect her boundaries, and you don't try to hit that too soon. Because then you're GAY. That's it. If you do, then you're a horny creep pervert. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that they're going to overlook at all. So you're trained, gentlemen. If you've been through this, now if you're one of those that didn't go through it, then that's different. And I'm glad that Mr. Cannon does not have first-hand knowledge of this. Now, second-hand knowledge of this, Mr. Cannon, I would suggest that you let me give you some description. Jay Cash could tell you some other things. There's some other men. One, I think his first name is Robert, but I don't have permission to give his YouTube name, so I won't give his last name. I suspect that Robert's his first name. It may not be, but he may be able to tell you some things. I yesterday made some guesses as to what he might have been through when he said that's pretty accurate, and I was sad by that. On one hand, I was glad I'd learned enough to be able to predict these things, but on the other hand, I was sad that I could be accurate about what someone else had been through by seeing a photograph one time. See, I don't know what region of the world, or which region of the country, he's in. But what he went through is what I would have gone through on the Gulf Coast. That hyper-scrutiny, these negative assumptions that they make. Yeah, it's bad. But I'm glad that some of you did not go through this firsthand. Wherever you lived, however you got around it. I'm glad about that. But just understand that a lot of us didn't. And so to you LSM gentlemen that did have to go through this, it's going to affect you. And that's not your fault. You got to manage it, but it ain't going to be your fault. If I had married an American woman, I would not have been able to make it work at this point. And there would have been nothing I could have done to make it work. because of what the previous ones had done, even when we didn't make it that far to a relationship, let alone a marriage. Just the lessons they taught that they did not teach to other men. And you know, a lot of LSM women, a lot of you, I'll move on to you now and address you. A lot of you may think that LSM men are just busy dissing you. That's not the case. What is the case, though, is this. We have found that there is a correlation between the way a woman looks and the way they mistreat us in the games that they'll play and how often they'll play these games. See, the games that women will play on any men, right, that we know of right now, generally were aimed at us first, very often, in multiple games. So across the board with Western men in general, you would expect that one, he got cheated on, the other one, he got stood up, and one got cheated on one time, the other one got stood up maybe 2 times by the same lady, and so that was it, that was the end of them, things like that. But when it comes to LSM men who came of age in the 90s or even late 80s, certainly after that point, we had the games aimed at us frequently by many and multiple games. So one would get evasive without you doing something wrong. The other one would get evasive. So in other words, let's say one cheats and has to let you know she cheated. The other one stands you up and has to do it multiple times. The other one tries to use you for your dough and get access to your accounts. Then the next one is just hyper-scrutinizing you all the time. Everything you do is wrong. And see, nowadays, men are beginning to say, well, this is becoming more common, but we dealt with this before other men had to deal with the same intensity of it and the variety. It's like it was aimed at us. Things that these ladies would not have tolerated men doing to them, they turn around and insist on doing to you. And there was not really a direct correlation in between shade and doing this. There was a direct correlation in between how decent a woman looked or thought she looked based on the male attention she got and option she had and her doing this. Some would say, well, wait, it's like that with every man. Still, again, the intensity was ramped up with us. That's the experience we have. We don't talk about it. We're not allowed to. We're not allowed to come to you as some kind of wounded bird because you're not therapists, and I understand. Well, most of us understand that. I'm just willing to tell you that this is what these men are going to be dealing with. That's what you may see them deal with it. Most LSM men don't think that it's okay to burden you with that, but they still are going to be dealing with it. So there may be times when men are surprised by certain things. That could happen. That's why it is, if you knock something over and you break it and he flinches, it could be from the sound. It could be, but it may also flinch and then watch you closely to see the mood that you're in, because we're the men who are used to women being in bad, pissy moods and taking it out on us, even though we had nothing to do with why they're in these moods. We're the ones that are used to that. We ain't got to be ugly to get that kind of treatment. Stuff that they do, and not to every single one. I'm not saying it's every single one of us, but the things they do to us in regions in which we were beyond the threshold of emasculation and stereotyping, where, you know, these things are going to have this effect, and we had to get used to this. Maybe if I'd grown up inland, maybe in somewhere like Jackson, Mississippi, it might have been different. I don't really know. I'm not sure. Maybe if I'd grown up in rural Alabama, it might have been different. I'm not sure. But growing up on the coast, not too far from New Orleans, as different as New Orleans is from the rest of the coast, and we all know that, but growing up not too far from it, no, it was bad. Not even just for me. It There was a friend of mine, oh, the women loved him behind his back. Behind his back. I kid you not, to his face, absolutely not. To his face, if they were nice to look at, they were actually harder on him. He wound up with unattractive women, period, and wound up being mistreated by several of them. He got married once, and she cheated. And she wasn't even all that. He was all that, as far as the women concerned, he was all that to look at, and he was a good dude too. So what was the problem? He was a good dude, and he looked like Garfield Bright or Christopher Williams. So when they liked him, they would treat him bad. And some people say it didn't help that he was adopted. I don't know how much that had to do with it. I didn't have to go through that. But what I can tell, the adoption and all that, but what I can tell you is that that's what he dealt with. I dealt with even worse. Every single time I would say something, it was consistently misinterpreted. Eventually I realized that they were intentionally misunderstanding everything I was saying. And the thing is, it's not like just, it didn't stop when we got out of middle school. No, this continued on and on and on and on and on into adulthood. Sometimes even up until now. And it is largely black women, period, that have this problem. Hell, I don't even say a whole lot to the black American women I work with at this point. I expect them to misunderstand. It always happens. We get into deep conversations and they just completely misunderstand it's like they're doing it intentionally so that they can argue with what they want to understand instead of what I'm actually saying, which is not even usually an argument against them. That's the gist of it. That's what goes on. And that's what black men in general have been dealing with lately, but we had to go through that first. So LSM women, understand, those of you that are in the golden sphere and you're going to give LSM men a chance, I'm not saying that they're going to come in bleeding on you from the trauma and that sort of thing. I'm just saying that they're going to have to actually readjust and relearn. They're going to think they're in trouble sometimes when they're not. And it's not because they're insecure or because they're weak. It's because that's actually how they were trained. And some of you would say, well, wait a minute. What about the women that did want them and did like them? You got to understand, ladies, and you're LS women. LSM women in the golden sphere that are talking about starting a golden community. You got to understand, you're online. When these men first begin to meet you in real life and pair bond with you in real life, this will be new for many of them. And you're not underranking them and hyper-scrutinizing them. This will be new for them. That's what I'm saying. Don't mistake their training for low self-esteem or low self-respect or insecurity or anything like that, because what they're expecting, they may be expecting certain things from you that should not be expected, but they've been trained that they got to expect them and prepare for them. And they may be expecting these things from you, not because they think they deserve it, but because they think that's what's coming anyway. And when you show them that, nope, you're not blaming them for something else that puts you in a bad mood, when you show them when they realize that you're not underranking them, when they realize that you're not more likely to hit them than other the girlfriends of their friends are likely to hit their friends. When they realize these things, of course, naturally, that's going to be an easy adjustment to make over time, when they realize that that's who you are and who you're not, that you're not the threat, you're not hyper-scrutinizing them, you're not assuming the worst about them and assuming the worst possible meaning of what they say, then naturally, over time, they're going to drop the guard. But in the beginning, you got to understand that they may over-explain some things. They may not even expect you to understand what they're saying properly. They may not defend themselves if you think they did something wrong and they did not do it. If somebody sends some porn to them on the phone somehow, and he don't know what it is till he clicks and opens, and you're like, why are you watching porn on the phone? He may not even tell you, I just found out it was porn. same time you did. He may not even tell you that because one, he ain't about to snitch out whoever sent it, but number two, he doesn't expect to be believed in many cases. If he's been through enough of the AA system, the Western system, he don't expect to be believed. And understand, most LSM men, especially ambiguous ones, have not pair bonded with women similar to them in phenotype and in shade before. Because see, it's not us sitting around dissing LSM women. We've just been told by them to keep a bigger distance. That's what that's about. Matter of fact, there have been times that I've met several of them who don't have the idea that the LSM woman is the one that's negatively stereotyping them. A lot of them don't even have that idea. They have the idea that the LSM woman just doesn't want to be around them because she feels like they look like they're related. That's a common lesson learned by many of the men. But understand, a lot of these men, when they first come into the golden sphere and they're willing to pair bond and this sort of thing, because we're not the ones that say we prefer not, or we disprefer our own phenotype and shade. We don't necessarily come in like that, but understand, we've been told that we are the dispreference for a long time, and we've been shown that. A lot of us have been shown this before we were ever told this. Like I said, I was 24 before I realized it. Now here I am, 44. And I got to, it's been 20 years since I was first told. Yeah, now it is 20 years since I was first told. The reason why I went through this differentiated treatment and hyper-scrutiny and extra blame and no benefit of the doubt and that sort of thing. And but because this had been going on for so long by the time I learned it, I'm still learning how to live without that type of microscope. Still am. I got to the times I got to adjust, and it's the adjustment sometimes that shocks my wife. Like, wait, you thought I was going to be angry? Why would I be angry about that with you? Did you have something to do with it? Nope, did not. See, that's what happens. You don't expect to when there's something good about you, you don't expect to be believed. That's the training, and that's what these men are going to come with. I'm not the only one. As a matter of fact, I was able to evade some things that other men were not. So I'm saying this because other men may have been through, they may have been through worse. And of course, they can readjust if they have the time to do so. But the other thing that happens, and this is one thing that's going to be very difficult for you LSM women, because you're still coming from the West and you've still been trained. Even if you're not malicious in doing so, you've still been trained and socialized to certain things. One of them is, many of you are not going to want a man that has a lower body count than you, is less experienced than you. And that doesn't make you different from other Western women. Really, from other women in the world, for that matter. It doesn't, but keep this in mind too. What it does do is this. These men that would be willing to go into a golden sphere and even start so-called golden communities for the benefit of the safety of future generations, usually got off to the start that I mentioned. And so, but let's say 16, by 16, they're less experienced with fewer ladies and girlfriends than others at 16. 20, less experienced than others at 20. You have a nerve in your nose, ladies. I think we all have it. But it's one nerve in a human nose called the vomeronasal organ, and it does not sniff out scents. It only picks up pheromones. And that nerve goes straight to, I think, the limbic center of the brain, some real primitive part of the brain. And so, ironically, when a man has been intimate with several women, some of the pheromones come off of him for a while. So the pheromone combination you pick up from these men is a combination of male and female pheromones, which sets you off. These men are going to have fewer of the lady pheromones coming off of them. You've been socialized to overlook that. These men are going to be coming with not the same experience as some of these other guys. They may be coming to you, at my age with a body count lower than mine. Mine's higher than the average, but it's in the single digits. And they may be coming to you with lower. They may be coming to you with an average the average body count. I forgot what the age was for though, but like the average man in the West, I think, has 3 sexual partners in his whole life, if I'm not mistaken. And they may be coming to you with 1 or 2. That's what's likely to happen. And so I am for you. If you're going to set up that space in that community, I'm all for it because of what you're trying to do. I just want you to understand that mate selection is going to factor in to the ability of this community to sustain itself. And unfortunately for you, you will have to make choices that other Western women will not make and don't know they have to, and may not have to make because they don't have the same goal. I'm not saying this out of hatred. I'm just saying this as an explanation. This is in addition to the burden that you already have, again, through no fault of your own. The burden that you have to find the snakes in the grass amongst you, the ladies that are in that golden sphere, but they want to drag the gender war into it. One of them got into a back and forth in the comments section with me last night, my time, about yesterday afternoon, you all's time. Yesterday morning for some of you. She actually wanted to say that men should have no qualms with getting married in the West legally in front of a court and being stuck with alimony if it doesn't work out. Like she said, if you're a man and you got a problem with getting married legally and taking this risk, you're weak. She wanted men to drop their guard. Why did she want men to drop their guard when there's an actual real danger? Because she wants men to be an easy target, and she's in the golden sphere. I don't think she's made any videos, but so you got this. And then of course you're going to be dealing with men who aren't necessarily, I'm not saying they're violent or abusive. I'm not saying that they're insane or crazy. Just you're going to be dealing with men who have been mistrained and mistaught because they've been mistreated before. Starting with the hyper-scrutiny. They will not believe. They will know that they have to have a healthy level of self-respect. They can't be arrogant. They can't be humble, but they're not going to believe that a Western woman can recognize the healthy level and the healthy balance in them when they reach it. That's the main thing I wanted to get at. They're not going to believe that a Western woman can recognize this. And you can prove it wrong. But in order to do so, as I've said, you will have to shun the Western programming. I'm not saying you'll have to have no standards. You're just going to have to recognize the hyper-scrutiny to which he's been subjected, and also realize that you've been socialized just by being in America and then being black, or partially raised around black folk. You've been socialized, just being Western for that matter. And being women, you've been told and socialized to hyper-scrutinize men, even if you have consciously made the decision you're not going to do it. And I think many of you listening to me have made that decision. That's the conscious decision. It's easier said than done. But I wanted you to keep in mind that you're going to have to face that, unfortunately. It's not his fault and it's not yours. Unless you were one of those that was doing stuff like this to men. Just understand that will be a real consequence. And many of these men, having listened to me at least, will say, well, I'm going to work on this in myself because I want to definitely start, I want to start the next lady off on a clean slate, especially if we're trying to start a community. Many of them, consciously speaking, will make the effort to, wipe the slate clean. You start off on a clean slate. You're a new person. And they would do that anyway, at least consciously. But just understand that the times when they do flinch will not be their fault. nor yours. Thank you for listening. I wish I had better news to give. But you now understand why it is that I say things like black, heterosexual, non-select male power, because boom shika don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.